Radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening. How you doing? How you doing? It is Fade to Black. No, wait. 2,000 shows, 3,000 shows, and I didn't say this is Fade to Black. See, that's what Paul Smith does to me. I'm all nervous. Paul Smith is with us tonight. Today is Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. Great week on the show. Monday, we were off air, but last night we had Jason Padgett on the show discussing physics. And wow, what a show last night. Tonight, as promised, Paul Smith is with us. We're going to be talking about remote viewing, RV, and / remote viewing and UFOs, and much more. Paul has a lot to share, and we will be going through all of that and much more tonight. Tomorrow night, Melanie Aguirre is with us. I believe I've been saying this all week, and I haven't gone back and checked, but I think this is Melanie's first time on Fade to Black, which doesn't make any sense because we're really good friends. And there you go. So Melanie Aguirre is with us tomorrow night. Now, 3 major events in the second half of 2024. I've been talking about this all week, and it's very important because the Contact at Sea cruise to Alaska, which is September 6th through the 13th, the ship itself is sold out. What happened over the weekend as the ship and the cruise line contacted us and our travel coordinator, they made available because we were like, hey, wait a minute. We've got more people that we would like to go on the cruise. So they made available to us 4 rooms. It was 3. Now it's 4 that we have discounted between yesterday and Monday, this coming Monday. So we have 7 days, 4 rooms with a $500 discount. There you go. So Fadernauts, go and get signed up. The links are below. After Monday, that's it. It's off because the ship is going to take those rooms back, and that's it. Okay, so right now, until Monday, $500 off. Go and get signed up and come to Alaska with us. And go and check out in the links. Go and look at the amazing lineup of speakers and presentations and everything else. I'm hosting. I'm doing the panels. I'm doing all of that stuff. You know, it's because it's my bliss. So come and hang out with all of us and go to Alaska. Then we've got Egypt in October 3rd through the 14th. That also is sold out, but the links are below and you can get on the waiting list. After that is Peru and Bolivia with Brian Forrester, and that is November 15th through the 27th. And that also has been sold out for the last 6 months. We have a couple of seats available that have just become available. Click on the links below and come to Peru and Bolivia with us. Now, I'm hosting that tour with Brian Forrester, and I'm here to tell you, Alaska, yes. Egypt, yes. Peru is a life-changing, paradigm-shifting, crazy experience, and you're not going to want to miss that. Yeah, it's Machu Picchu, but it's Pumapunku and Amaru, Muru, and Sacsayhuaman. Ollantay, Tambo. It's absolutely crazy. So come and hang out with us. Lake Titicaca, Tiwanaku. Okay. So the links for that are below. All right, let's get straight to it. Paul Smith is with us tonight. Like I just said, we're going to talk about the links between RV and UFOs, remote viewing and UFOs. What is remote viewing? His history with it. and also the philosophical and extraterrestrial aspects of consciousness. We're going to do that and much more tonight. Paul Smith, Ph.D., became a psychic spy in 1983 when the U.S. Army recruited him for training as a remote viewer in what would become known as the Stargate program. A career intelligence officer, Desert Storm veteran, Arabic linguist, Middle East specialist, and military remote viewer. He was trained by the legendary Ingo Swan and Dr. Hal Puthoff. We'll get into all of that. And then, of course, after he retired from the military, he founded the Remote Viewing Instructional Services, Inc. We'll talk about all of that, and the links for Paul are below. And I would like to just get straight to it and say, welcome, Paul Smith.
Well, thank you. That's the warmest welcome I've had all night.
But you knew this was coming. See,
yes, thanks to modern technology, I did.
And how often do you hear that joke, Paul? Well, didn't you already know? Right?
Hey, I was the one that told it originally about 5,000 years ago.
Yeah. All right. Now, here's the deal. All right.
Well, before you go there, I want to say, I really wish I could go on that Alaska cruise. I've always wanted to cruise Alaska, and doing it with you would have been a real hoot, I have to say. Well, it's not unfortunate. I had a different offer. I'll be at the Phenomenon in Vernal, Utah, hanging out with the Skinwalker Ranch guys. Who
that doesn't suck. That doesn't suck.
No, okay. That all of them together are about like you, if you put
but
no, I don't want to throw them under the bus. They're good guys. Yeah.
Well, okay, so that's where I wanted to say this, that Paul, you and I are friends, and we're great friends and things, and the audience certainly picks up on that. And tonight I'm going to try to avoid the friendship card and try to be as serious as I can. Will you help me do that?
So are you telling me that I can't try and be witty? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, see, but that's okay. Let me tell you something. You and I'm saying this for the audience so they understand. Paul, you're extremely intelligent. You're very, very funny. You have a rich history behind you, and you are able to tell the story behind that in great detail. You have all of that going for you. But here's here's the other part. For me, that's not part to me, of the best part of your greatness. You know what the best part of your greatness is?
I am anxious to find out. Oh, teach.
You teach. You share knowledge, and you do it in a way that people can understand and comprehend. And that is a huge quality that most people don't have. They have the knowledge in their head, but they can't get it out. And you've got that, man. It's magical. So
I appreciate that, Jimmy. And I like to think that's what my superpower, if I have one. It's that one. A lot of people are really smart, but they don't think about what they're trying to explain from the perspective of the person that's never heard of it before. And so consequently, they know everything, and they make it complicated without needing to, and don't realize they're doing it. And the key is to think about, what if I didn't know anything about it and I was trying to learn about it? What would I need to know, and how would I need to learn it?
I remember, and maybe the audience can wrap their head around this. I remember us having a dinner one night, and at the table, this is off the top of my head, we had Jacques Vallée for sure, Danny Sheehan, yourself, me, Richard Dolan, and I'm trying to think, was Linda sitting with us too as well? I think so.
It might have been Russell. It's possible
Russell Tarr. So we had this
power I'm not
table,
sure.
But this is the deal. We had the power table, right? And you're sitting next to me, and I'm looking. We're eating dinner, and everybody shut up to listen to Paul Smith. And I made that comment during dinner. I'm like, everybody here does nothing but talk. Right now, They're just listening to you, Paul, and we all laughed about it. But that's a pretty powerful statement. And now, enough of the bromance. Let's get let's get straight to it. The idea behind remote viewing, and if we go back to 1983 and you being recruited, take me right before that. Did you understand the gift? And when did it become apparent to you that something was going on that was pretty special?
Well, at that point, I'd never put the words remote and viewing together, which put me in league with just about everybody else in the world, except for a few people. I didn't know it existed. I had actually, when I was younger, I'd been interested in extrasensory perception, or ESP. I like to read science fiction that involved ESP, like Andre Norton and Zena Henderson and folks like that. But I'd been involved in a science fair project in junior high that involved the Zener cards, the wavy lines and the stars. And you see the opening of Ghostbusters, right? And that, I have to tell you, one of my classmates who ended up in the Army as well, she had set it up, and I don't know, I think she had 6 or 7 people participating, and we had worked the Zener cards trying to transmit back and forth, mental images and stuff. Total failure. Nobody in there succeeded. And me, I was, people like to say psychic as a brick. I was a really big brick. Nothing happened. And so I became skeptical about it. And I come to Fort Meade working as a Mideast desk analyst, and not thinking anything about it, although I had been introduced to spoon bending. Maybe later I'll tell you that story. It's pretty interesting. By a 2-star general introduced me to spoon bending, and that was pretty interesting. But and I noticed the neighbor next to me and the neighbor across the street, Skip Atwater and Tom McNair, they didn't wear civilian clothes, or they wore civilian clothes. Tom had a beard, but they're living in officers' quarters. They Captain so-and-so on them. And one day they come and knock on my door. I'm wondering what the heck they do. And they never could tell me, which was odd because I had enough clearances to know everything almost. And they said, "We think you might be good at what we do." And I said, "Well, what do you do?" And they said, "We can't tell you." And I said, "Well, how do I know I can be good at that?" "We'll give you some tests." So I took these tests, and I seemed to score where they wanted me to. Invited me over, and Tom, his button-down collar shirt, not an Army uniform, with his beard, he sits me down and has me fill out this really draconian NDA, is what you call it in the civilian world. More than anything I'd ever seen. It was kind of like, I call it my Men in Black moment. Not my Men in Fade to Black moment, but my Men in Black moment.
Right.
And Tom looks at me and he says, "Our mission here is to collect intelligence against foreign threats using a parapsychology discipline known as remote viewing. Essentially," and I'm paraphrasing here, "we're inviting you to volunteer to become a psychic spy." And I'm thinking, he says, "You don't have to tell me right now. You can have till tomorrow to decide." And I said, "No, I absolutely want to do this."
Oh, wait, Paul, let's get some context here if we can.
Yeah.
Did they take the time to explain this black magic voodoo, bullshit? If you know what I mean?
Not at that point. There would have been too much to explain. But see, I'll tell you what was going on. What was going on in my head as he's saying those words. It only took about 15 seconds for him to say it. And that was enough time. It's going through my head was, I used to be fascinated by ESP. I loved the subject. Then I had this failure, so I thought there's nothing to it. He's telling me there's a line item in the federal budget that pays people to learn this stuff. There is no way in hell I'm not going to do this. So it was instant. It was instant. I knew I wanted to do it. And he was a little surprised because most folks, they say, "Well, gee, what's this going to do to my career?" I didn't care. I didn't care what it did in my career, And so it went on from there.
Now, and help me again understand this, because were you frustrated in your intelligence analyst side of things in the Army, where not everybody's happy with their gig, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that suddenly this gift comes down from the universe, and you're like, "Yeah, okay, no, this sounds more appealing to me than my current gig, if you know what I mean, right? Did you have any frustrations with?
Yeah. So there was a little bit of that. So I had come from being an intelligence officer in a special forces unit in Germany, and that was an exciting assignment, right? I'd gone to a officer school, advanced training in the Army in Arizona, and then I come here and they put me to work essentially as glorified bookkeeper, routing intelligence reports back and forth. And I was doing a name list, a Farsi language name list, and of key people in the Iranian government and military. I don't do Farsi, but it's the alphabet's the same as the Arabs, right? So I was doing those things, and it was just like being an accountant, except with names and intelligence reports. It was really tedious. Now, I knew it was temporary. I mean, you never in an Army job for longer than 3 years, and this one I wouldn't have been there probably that long. But when this opportunity came up, it was mind blowing, literally, about every sense of the word you can imagine. And I didn't think in terms of, well, I don't like my current job. That sounds more interesting. It was, even if I'd absolutely loved my current job, I'd have wanted to do this. That's what it boils down to.
Well, and people think, right, when they hear intelligence analyst, James Bond, right? That's honest, right? But that's not necessarily the case. You're looking at data and trying to assess and then get a report generated. That's basically the gig, right? That's
what it boils down to. And my job was kind of like a clearinghouse. We'd get intelligence reports come in, and then we'd try and match it up with people who needed that information. So, I mean, it wasn't totally boring. It was kind of intriguing to see what they were finding out in the field, in their collection means and so on. But it was really more of an accounting job than anything else. And I had not had a job that tedious yet in the Army until then. But in the Army, you always have at least one tedious job sometime in your career.
Absolutely. Everybody has John detail, and you might do a stint in the motor pool even, right? So I get all of that. Now, okay. First day on the gig. Now, most people are going to say, I've seen the movie, right? The Men Who Stare at Goats, right? and which, by the way, a few weeks ago, I want to tell everybody, we've had Paul booked twice on the show this month, and I had to personally cancel and move this forward. But 3 weeks ago, when you were coming on the show, I went and watched The Men Who Stare at Goats. And
homework.
I gotta say, I'm just gonna say it. It's a better movie than most people think. It's actually pretty cool. But but people are going to think that and make that connection. Not to ask you how close it was, but when you walked in that first day, was there a Men Who Stare at Goats kind of vibe going on?
No. It was a much more disciplined military environment, even at the level we were at.
Okay.
I tell people Men Who Stare at Goats is really funny, and I'm glad they put the tagline. It said, more of this is true than you think, or something like that, at the very start of the movie. And it's kind of like if you take a whole bunch of different stories that aren't connected, and you pour them in a blender and turn on the blender and pour them out into a mold, and that's kind of how the movie was made. I read the book too, and the book was entertaining, and so was the movie. But both of them stray a long ways away from the truth. They mix psyops and ESP ops, if you will, right? So psyops is not the same thing as psychic, functioning at all. It's got nothing to do with it. And yet, in the guy who originally wrote it, John Ronson, he kind of just put them all together. He was looking for an exciting story. He wasn't necessarily looking for a truthful account. And so there was pieces of it that were sort of true and pieces of it that were totally far-fetched, but it was very entertaining. I got a real kick out of it. And as long as you don't expect it to be true history, it's definitely worth watching.
Well, it's got one of the best endings in the history of Hollywood. So tell me about the training itself, and then we'll move on to present day stuff. But for the audience, everybody's thinking the same thing. How cool is that? And how was it done, and what was the process? So let's go there for a little bit, if we can, and take us through the training and what was that like? And then at what point did you realize that you or anybody else could do this?
So I'm going to answer the end of your question first, because it actually goes back to your previous question that we didn't get to that part. And that is, when did I figure out that it actually did work? And of course, when I'm being read on the program, being invited to join, I didn't know if it worked or not, except for the fact that if Congress usually doesn't levy money for something that's a total waste. We won't go too much into that. But I came in on the job thinking, am I going to be able to do this? And if I can't, are they going to fire me the first week? Right. And it was about a week before I actually got to try it. And it involves what we call an outbounder. An outbounder is where you, the viewer, in a I'll say a sealed room. It's got all the windows are covered over, and the door is it's all soundproof and all that stuff, so that you can't get outside information inside the room. And then what we call the outbounder beacon team, a couple of people, in this case it was Tom McNair and I think Charlene Schufelt, they are assigned to target randomly in the near vicinity. They get in the car and drive away, and you're inside the room, so you can't see which direction they turn or anything else. You get no hints. They go to a location, and then afterwards they come back, get you after you've done your remote viewing, and take you there, and you can compare what you got with the actual target. And so the target this time was this huge water tower. It's kind of like a spider one with all these pipes going down, and it was blue, and it was massive. It was a huge thing. And they go to water tower, they come back and they bring donuts with them. And, and we're eating donuts as we drive back out to the target. We get to the water tower, and it was nothing like I'd got in my remote viewing session. Nothing. I had perceived an indoor setting with windows with filmy curtains on it and little tea tables with chairs and some kind of counter in the back with transparent glass, I would assume, and little
the exact opposite.
Yes, completely different. So I'm going around, looking at my sketches, no resemblance, reading my words, no resemblance. Darn it. Until we get in the car, we head back to Fort Meade, driving along, and we go past this place, and my attention was just drawn to that. And I said, what's that over there? And Skip Atwater, who's running this whole thing, knew what had happened. He said, before he said anything else, he said, if you don't get the intended target, it doesn't matter what else you get instead. And I said, I don't know what that means. He said, okay, go ahead in there. So they pulled up in there. We walk into the donut shop where they got the donuts, and there's filmy curtains on the windows, and there's little tea tables and chairs, and then there's a counter with transparency in it, and behind the counter, of course, are donuts lined up, right? And so I come out of there having blown the target, having screwed up, and yet having successfully remote viewed. And in fact, in one way, that was more convincing, because nobody had intended for me to get that donut shop, and yet I got it very accurately.
Now, was that an aha moment?
It was. Yeah. It was a chagrin. Oh man, I screwed that up. But then on the other hand, but it absolutely worked, and I'm not totally failure at this. And so that was the starting point of my career.
Who was the crew at that point?
So Joe McMonigal was still there, and I'll throw these names out. Some of them you'll recognize, and some, and there may be people in your audience who don't recognize Joe McMonigal. Even he's probably the most respected remote viewer today, I would say, and one of the most successful. Joe McMonigal was still there for a few more months. Charlene Schufelt and Tom McNair I mentioned, Skip Atwater, myself. We had a couple of secretarial staff. The branch chief was Lieutenant Colonel Brian Busby, and I think that might be everybody that was there at the time I signed on. They were going to add a couple more people later on, but I think that was it.
Now, how did you get introduced to Ingo and Puthoff?
So the reason they even hired me in the first place was because they had a contract. So the commander of the Intelligence and Security Command, which was the senior headquarters for this thing, was a guy named General Bert Stubblebine. He's the guy that introduced me to bent spoons. Again, we may talk about that later. Anyway, Stubblebine was very much a supporter of remote viewing. And he wanted the people who had developed remote viewing in the first place, the people out at SRI, which were Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, and then Ingo Swan, and there were some other folks out there too. He wanted them to come up with a training method that could teach INSCOM soldiers how to remote view. And they had developed that, and they had started a proof of principle training project with Tom McNair. They had a contract to train 3 more INSCOM remote viewers. And so I was their Charlene was their first hire for that. I was their second hire, and there was going to be another guy come in named Bill Ray, who it turned out I knew from before and didn't realize I knew. Anyway, so he was going to come in January. And so we all finally, Bill comes in, we get together, we go out to Menlo Park to the Stanford Research Institute. By then it was known as SRI International. And they had been tried really hard to make me scared stiff of Ingo Swan. They were telling me how strict he was and how much of a Martinet he was, and how much you had to do what he said or you'd be in a lot of trouble and stuff. And so we show up, and I'm thinking, oh no, am I even going to get along with Ingo Swan? He turned out to be a really nice guy. Okay. And so the first day we get there, we meet Ingo, we meet Hal, and we all go to lunch in the cafeteria of SRI. And Ingo was dressed in blue jeans, harness boots, and a brown corduroy jacket with patches in the elbows, a shooting jacket, button-down shirt. Found out later he got the jacket at a thrift store. And anyway, we had a great time. Of course, then the training started, and Ingo could be really strict, but it wasn't in a bad way. It was constructive. He was really good at helping people understand the process.
And so much has been about Ingo Swan. Of course, I don't want to let other names go by here, and Russell and so forth, because they're friends too as well. But Ingo has gone into legend status, not legendary. You know what I mean? Like, this is really blown up around him. How accurate is the legend versus the Ingo Swan that you knew?
Well, I think we've managed to maintain a relatively realistic view of him. Of course, everybody thinks that he could have done he got every remote viewing right. He did, outstanding. And he did really well as a remote viewer, but no remote viewer gets everything right. Not even Joe McMonigle, and Joe will admit that. But Ingo, of course, was really good at it, and he ought to have been, because he's the one that invented it in the first place. I say invented, it's fuzzy what you want to call it. In a way, it was invention. It was kind of a mix of invention and discovery. He came up with the idea of remote viewing, and then at SRI, with in partnership with the other folks, they built up quite a strong scientific base for it, how you improve it, all that kind of thing. So Ingo, I think he's still kind of seen with realistic view today, but more and more he does become a legend. And he's, it's almost like he founded a religion with remote viewing in a way, because he's kind of the founder, and everybody has reverence for him and all that. And of course, I knew a side of him, like he liked to smoke his cigarillos, and he never passed up a good glass of wine. And he was a human being, and a very likable human being, who could get a little bit grumpy at times, like most of us.
And certainly the coolest name ever, right? Let's and I say that with affection. With total affection, but man, it's a pretty cool name to be tied with somebody in this world.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so let's go back to you in Fort Meade. Do you believe that the the idea, the foundations of remote viewing continue to this day under another name and another organizational name in the intelligence community.
So let me restate the question to make sure I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is there a remote viewing program still going on in the government somewhere?
Yeah, under a different name, right? It was Stargate. They technically that ended. We all know, the CIA continued Pat Price and what happened there. But officially they ended the program. But did they?
So, that's, I have to tell you what one of my colleagues, Lynn Buchanan, says. He says, if there is a secret program going on and I know about it, I wouldn't be able to reveal that. So I'd have to say, I can't tell you. Right? He says, if there isn't a secret program going on, or if there is one and I don't know about it, I'd have to say, I can't tell you. So I'll just say, I can't tell you. No, I'm just teasing. I don't think you got that joke, Jimmy. Never mind. That's okay.
No, because it's not a joke. It's not a joke.
Okay. Well, I will tell you what I know and what I believe, and that's the best I can do. First of all, I know the military services aren't doing remote viewing. I know they do not have a program. Okay. Does the CIA have a program? I doubt it does, but it's not impossible. The reason I doubt it does is because they definitely did cancel it at the time it was canceled. And it was because the director of the CIA was very much a skeptic. He didn't want to have anything to do with remote viewing. And there's no way he kept it going at that time. Now, could they have readopted it? It's possible. When we did the 2002 remote viewing conference, Hal Puthoff and I were there, and we were approached by a third level executive from the CIA, and I can't tell you too much about it, but this person said, I purposely came here because I wanted to find out from you guys what it would take to get a program going again. And we said, well, we'll be happy to weigh in on it. Do you have buy-in by the next levels up? And no, she's third down. So we're talking about, well, there's directors, deputy director, and there's an assistant deputy director, something like that. You're talking about up in the stratosphere of CIA leadership. And she contacted us later and said, I took this into my next hire, so the deputy director level. And he said, there's no way we're going to do this. So just get it out of your head. And so at least back then, she would have been in a position where she could know whether there's a program or not. She was high enough level for that. And the fact is that the CIA was still not at all on board with this. Okay. And I would find it hard to believe that that's changed much over the years. Now, obviously, I can't say for sure that they didn't start a new program. There's one place in the government where there might be one. And I think there's actually a fairly good chance. So the National Security Agency, or no such agency as we refer to it in the military, National Security Agency had a program at the same time that we were being trained. A couple of NSA employees were being trained at the same time we were being trained. Nowhere did I hear that they had terminated their program. Not that we would have necessarily heard that. They could have done it and just not told anybody. But there was a whistleblower from the NSA who was pretty well placed. He had decent access and placement. And he hinted, said, I don't remember exactly how he did it, that they did have a remote viewing program at CIA or at NSA still. Now, I want to say that was in the mid 2000s, somewhere there. So, I can't say if NSA has a program, but it certainly is possible, and there's some reason to think it might. And frankly, I hope it does. I think it's irresponsible not to have a program like this in the military. But the military has done well, of course, NSA isn't a military organization, but in the intelligence establishment. And it doesn't mean that the government hasn't done irresponsible things in the past. But I'd like to think that NSA does have a program going on.
Isn't it interesting how you can throw the NRO into this mix too as well, because of the secrecy that is involved there and the way that they operate. But the NSA isn't it interesting that here in the United States that we have an agency like that that is not bound to law?
No, it is. It is. No, it is. It is. No, that's a Hollywood belief about the intelligence world. NSA is bound by law. It's bound by executive order. It has requirements it has to live up to. It has congressional, senatorial, and congressional oversight. They do keep a pretty tight leash on it. It doesn't mean that some of the rules aren't relaxed, because they have to be, right? They have to be.
Right.
But it's not a rogue organization like you see in all of the movies. It's not like that at all.
Well, we're not here to debate, Paul, but you and I have always had very frank and open conversations, right? And that's how people learn from each other. But I would say, if not to bring up Snowden, but he's a really good example of how the NSA feels that they don't have to give a crap. Okay.
How do you mean that? I don't know.
In the types of surveillance that they were, on U.S. citizens, private U.S. citizens that haven't broken any laws.
Well, yeah. So there was, I'll call it loosey-goosey, but it's still under a certain umbrella, right? If you look at the things that they were doing, they made sense. Whether or not they abided by our desires for privacy or not, that's a different story. But what they were trying to do made sense in terms of traffic analysis and so on, which I won't explain, this complicated thing. But they did have a sort of an umbrella of permission to do it. Now, people can argue about whether that was properly vetted and whether Congress had the right to do what they did, whether it was constitutional or not. And of course, the Supreme Court never did a review of that stuff, right? But I think largely it was done with good intentions, because they had a war on terror to fight, and that is a monster. I mean, dead serious. That is a monster, given how modern technologies enabled terrorism to flourish. And some of the stuff they're doing, I don't necessarily agree with either. But I think people are a little bit too hard on the NSA when they don't consider how much between a rock and a hard place they were. They were trying to prevent stuff from happening, and yet they had these rules they had to follow, and in between got a little fuzzy. I don't deny that it got a little fuzzy, right? As far as I can remember, and I'm not an expert on this, as far as I can remember, there was never any evidence that any American citizens were actually harmed by what they did, right? I can't recall for sure. Maybe somebody will have an example, but maybe some of what they did was questionable from a privacy perspective. That's a different story.
Yeah. And not to get too sideways on this, but here's the connection. And this is where I'm going with this. Does remote viewing and the way that it can be utilized and applied, is there a red line that could be crossed there into privacy as well?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's probably even, except for a couple of things I'm going to tell you about, it is probably a bigger danger of that, potential for that, than any electronic eavesdropping you could get into. Because remote viewing is not detectable. I mean, I get phone calls from all these people saying, well, so-and-so's remote viewing me. And I know for a fact they're not. Or if they are, even if they are remote viewing you, you don't know. Your remote viewing leaves no trace. There's no way to know that anybody is remote viewing you. And that was researched at SRI because the government wanted to know whether you could tell whether the Russians are remote viewing us or not. And they found no indicators, no way of finding that out. So there's no way to know. And so, I mean, that's a perfect eavesdropping device if there's no trace, right? You don't need a piece of equipment. You don't even need to be in the same country, and you can collect information about somebody. Now, the one thing that kind of moderates that is, first of all, remote viewing isn't perfect. You can get a lot of useful information, but there's always noise involved. It's a very noisy signal to noise channel. And so when you're doing remote viewing, there's a lot of mental noise that's going on. And if you haven't been properly trained, it can really be kind of overwhelming. You'll end up with a lot of bad data. and you won't be able to tell what's bad and what's good. Okay. So there's that. It's a quality control issue. You could, first of all, nobody is going to put anybody in jail strictly because of remote viewing data, because there's a massive possibility that you're wrong. The remote viewer is wrong. But now you can use it to solve a crime. One of my colleagues and former sister-in-law, Angela Thompson Smith, she presented evidence that was used in court that did get a guy convicted, because it led them to the evidence that got the guy convicted.
Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah. She's amazing. Yeah. Oh, okay, so let me give a practice. I'm going to make this up off of the top of my head. Okay, so let's see if I can improvise well. So let's say in your neighborhood, cats are disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
Neighbors are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys are all talking, and you're like, man, I think it's that dude down there, third house. I think he's kidnapping our cats.
Catnapping.
Yeah, catnapping. and you go, okay, could you remote view that and then find out that it's not the strange dude at the end of the street, but it's your next door neighbor? Is that an application that could be applied? And if it is, and let's say you go through with it, do you turn around and confront your neighbor and knock on his door and see him, stewing cats or whatever he's doing?
So I'll tell you a even bigger story about that later on. But right now I'm going to say that's really hard to do.
That's hard to do. Would that be an invasion of privacy? And is that standing outside of your...
Unless your state has some rule against invading privacy, only the government can invade your privacy, right? So, obviously other people can, but it's illegal for the government to do it. It's not illegal for you necessarily to listen through the wall with a glass to your next door neighbor having an argument. That's not necessarily illegal. Some states have laws that might prevent that, but it is a invasion of privacy, but not necessarily illegal, right? But
you have to have okay. So are there unwritten or written morals and ethical codes for remote viewers?
Yeah, there are. In fact, the International Remote Viewing Association, which I helped found and was president of for a long time. Well, my computer's making dumb noises here. Anyway, they have a statement of ethics on their website, and you can go check that out. It's irva.org, their initials plus .org. But these are not enforceable, obviously. If nobody knows you're remote viewing somebody and you're in your own house and the doors are closed and the windows are shut, they're not going to know you're doing it. So they're not really enforceable by any kind of higher authority. I'm going to go back for a minute, back to the military. So in the military, we are absolutely forbidden to remote view any U.S. person, okay, by executive order 13033. I can't remember the number of it, because we're a military organization and we were not allowed to spy on American persons, and that whether it's an individual or a corporation, whatever, we're not allowed to do that. And we were very strict not to do that. We only did it if there was some kind of court order, and that was so rare that anything like that would happen. That is essentially never happened. There was one instance where it did. They caught a renegade customs agent. That's a whole nother story to tell. But if you're remote viewing, it's only your own moral compass that will stop you from invading someone's property.
It's a powerful tool, man. It's a powerful tool.
Yeah. Now, the one thing that's, I already mentioned, the one thing that saves it from being too powerful is the fact that it's often not accurate. And if you believe that everything you get through a remote viewing session is true, then you are going to be in real trouble, ultimately, right? And the other thing that keeps you from doing it is the fact that if you're a viewer, you have to be blind to the target. Okay. What that means is I can't know what the target is that I'm remote viewing. So if the cats are disappearing and it's my neighborhood and everybody's talking about it and they say, we need to remote view what's happening to the cats, I can't do it. I would have to get somebody outside of the neighborhood who doesn't know anything about it and task them on this problem. in order to have a chance of getting accurate information. Because if you know what the target is, the mental noise that goes on just skyrockets, because if you know what it is, then you start speculating, you start guessing. It's things you already know about or things you think you know about it are all right there in your head, and you end up not being able to trust anything you come up with. You might actually get the right information, but it's so messed up with all of this other stuff that you won't actually know. And so that's another thing that at least exercises a bit of control on remote viewing as a privacy invader, is because you can't just arbitrarily decide to spy on your girlfriend as a remote viewer, because you won't be able to know what you got is true or not. You could end your relationship based on false information that your brain.
You can end up beating up the wrong guy.
That
right?
could happen too, or starting to beat up the wrong guy.
Started to beat up the. Okay, so how does it work? And before you answer, is science today showing us with quantum physics and theoretical physics exactly how the process is working? And of course, I'm referring to energy and gravity and entanglement and these other theories that are being worked on in the world of physics. How exactly? What's your ideas?
We are not even close to understanding how remote viewing works. Not even close. There's plenty of hypotheses, and I'm saying hypothesis on purpose because they don't even reach the level of theory yet. Okay? There's plenty of hypotheses, one of which is maybe it's the interdimensional connection somehow or other, whatever that means, because we've never succeeded in actually establishing that there are interdimensional connections. One of the popular ones is quantum entanglement, like you mentioned, right? Non-locality is another word for it. In which things that are particles that are very closely associated with in the past, no matter how far apart, seem to have an affinity for each other. You change one and the other one changes, and that kind of thing. So quantum entanglement, the reason that's a popular hypothesis is because we don't know anything else that sort of fits it. But I don't think entanglement answered the question either, because first of all, entanglement happens mostly at scales so small they can't account for the kind of information that you get in a remote viewing setting. There's been nothing that demonstrates that you can transmit information at the level you get in remote viewing through an entangled connection. The other problem is entanglement doesn't explain how you get information about the future and how you get information about the past. There is one thing in physics where there's a tiny dislocation. Well, I don't know what the word is. Into the past, and it involves at the particular particle level, and it's very small, and it's largely theoretical, and it's mostly mathematically established. I'm not sure they've ever actually shown it in an experimental setting, and so you get a little bit of time movement in non-locality and quantum entanglement, but nowhere near what you get in a remote viewing setting, and so entanglement doesn't answer the mail. In fact, I am dubious that you'll find a physical universe explanation. And of course, that's one of my pet peeves, that people become physicalists and they believe that everything's going to be explained in some physics way. And frankly, I believe that there is more to the universe than just the physical universe. And I think there's evidence for it. I think they really well-founded ESP evidence, which, the skeptics claim there isn't any, but there is a ton, literally a ton of very well-established ESP-based evidence. I think that is very strong evidence. In fact, I wrote my dissertation for the University of Texas on this. It's very strong evidence that the universe isn't just physical, that there's also a consciousness component to it as well.
Well, okay, that's exactly where this conversation needs to go. So let's start with the fundamental side of that.
Mm-hmm.
I know where you're going, but I'm going to ask the question and then you can actually answer it.
because the people listening in don't know where you're going or nor me, right? Yeah.
But you already knew that. Is consciousness of the physical or non-physical? It's the chicken or the egg, right? So what is it?
Well, I think in a way it's both. So I think there are aspects of consciousness that are non-physical, and we'll get into what that might mean in a second. but it has to in some way integrate with consciousness, or with the physical universe. Otherwise, our brains and our minds can't function together, right? And so, in fact, I don't know if you saw my talk at Paola Harris's conference about alien consciousness. I show that you have.
I introduced you, Paul.
Well, that doesn't mean you paid attention to my talk.
I didn't pay attention to a word of it.
Anyway,
no, it was fascinating. It was a fascinating presentation.
So I showed that there are cognitive things going on, like we're processing brain stuff, and then interleaved with that is consciousness elements that inform and interact with those. Okay, now how do they do that? We don't know, but if you look at how things work, it seems like that they do have to interact in some way. The example I use is like if you take a piece of paper and you have a magnet underneath it, and you pour iron filings on the piece of paper on the top. They don't ever touch the magnet, but they arrange themselves according to the magnetic field, right? That's a physical example, but I think in a way there are probably boundary conditions and bridge laws that allow consciousness in the physical universe to correspond in order for them to act as partners. Okay. But I think that consciousness, whatever that is, I just whacked my mic. I hope it's okay. Consciousness, whether that's a one unbounded thing or whether it's made up of a whole bunch of individual consciousness that represent our consciousness, is an independently existent element. I'll say element for want of a better term. And the physical universe is its own kind of independently existent element, and that they can be partners at times, but in general they're independent of each other. Now, so what happens when you have that is you get a lot of skeptics saying, well, all of this remote viewing stuff and ESP and all that violates the laws of physics. And I say, that's just baloney. It's just baloney altogether. It doesn't violate the laws of physics, but because it isn't part of physics in the first place. You can't violate the laws of Great Britain if you're in the United States, so it's nonsense to speak in terms of violating the laws of physics. If it's a physically governed phenomenon, then that's something that could violate the laws of physics, but it never does, right? If it's a conscious domain phenomenon, whatever that we want to call that, then it doesn't violate any physics laws because it isn't part of physics. So,
well, see, and this is where physicists, and I'm going to say physicists that are doofuses, okay, get it wrong.
Or like Stephen Hawking, you mean?
Well, okay.
No, he was a bright guy. Stephen Hawking was a bright guy.
Yeah, he was a bright guy. I met him, by the way. One day I'll tell you the story. It was pretty nuts. Okay. Anyway, so what the physicist is trying to say, the laws of physics that they're talking about, is you take a baseball, physical, right? Mm-hmm. It's a physical object. Mm-hmm. You throw it. Now you've got its mass, you've got its velocity, and so forth, and you've got gravity involved, and you can, in an equation, know where that baseball is going to land. Mm-hmm. Where it breaks the law of physics is if you throw it and it keeps on going and leaves the atmosphere. That would be breaking the laws of physics. Mm-hmm. Your brain being able to say that, and you can think that and laugh about it, consciousness, is not breaking the laws of physics. Mm-mm. Right? That's where they got it wrong. You can't have it both ways. The ability to think, laugh, and ponder and speak and dream, consciousness, something that you don't understand, because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's breaking the laws of physics. You understand? That's where they get it wrong.
Yeah.
They need somebody to stand up to them and explain it to them that way.
Yeah, Rupert Sheldrake and lots of other folks have done it, and they don't get it. But you have to understand they've got their own just so story. So they say, well, it's just obvious you're not breaking the laws of physics because the brain just is the mind. The mind just is the brain. The mind is a product of brain interaction. And even if it's an emergent property, which means it grows out of that underlying brain activity, and yet it's a bit more higher and above the brain, even if it's emergent activity, it's still part of the physical universe. So you're not breaking any physical laws by doing that. But the problem is that's an assumption. right? They assume that the mind is the brain. They've never been able to show that. They think they have, because it's what I call the argument from physiology, where if you give somebody a sedative, then it alters their brain, or alters their mental behavior, right? And to me, or even better, anesthetic. You give somebody, not an anesthetic. Yes, anesthetic. You knock them out. You're right. Their consciousness goes away. They say, well, it's obvious. You shut down the brain function that creates consciousness, and therefore mind just as the brain. Well, no, because there's another model that works just as well and seems to actually support the ESP data a lot better. And that is, of course, that the brain is just a receiver of this consciousness stuff. That the brain is the mechanism which, in and of itself, it does a lot of stuff. And a lot of stuff that I think we attribute to consciousness is really brain functioning. I think there is a somewhat truthful element to that. But it also works as this interface. Ingo Swan called it a transducer. It transduces consciousness into a kind of physical behavior, or at least connects the two. And that's part of the brain function. So if you shut that down, it's like taking a TV and taking one of the tubes out, and the TV stops receiving the program that is broadcast over the air because it's not functioning right as a receiver. And so if you give an anesthetic and consciousness goes away, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's because it's a brain function. It can also mean that all you did was short out the receiver that's normally gets that consciousness signal. Now, you can't prove it either way. And that's one of the arguments that I always have with physicalists, is say, you can't prove to me that consciousness is a brain function. There's this alternative explanation that demonstrates exactly the same phenomenon. And yet you can't provide me any evidence that distinguishes between those two hypotheses. So, you don't know what you're talking about anymore.
Here's
what I'm talking about.
And here's the crazy part about all of that, especially when we're dealing with the black and white pragmatic atheist physicist scientist, right? We all know who we're talking about, like everyone in the hard sciences is that, but they still have deja vu, and they'll explain it away in some crazy fashion. Oh, it's just chemistry. It's my brain trying to understand the current situation that I'm in, and it's associating a past memory with this, and it's applying, they'll totally go the other way. So they convince themselves to keep the blinders on. Yeah, it's interesting. And isn't deja vu, like, for me, or to you, or to the world, isn't that one of the best examples of the supernatural and something that we just simply can't explain?
Didn't you already just say that?
Yeah, exactly. yeah, exactly. Right.
Well, I don't know. That's something I'm not going to express too much of an opinion on, because I don't know a lot about the subject. I think it's feasible. It could be a physical occurrence, or it could be a form of precognition, which of course is an ESP related thing, or maybe at different times it is both, or either or. People talk about intuition, and of course the mainstream science is that intuition is strictly a physical thing. You're just subliminally, you're picking up information from your environment, and then your brain synthesizes it and gives you a feeling, or causes you to react in some way that you are not consciously aware of that information or that process, and yet you take action based on intuition, right? Then there's others who swear all intuition is ESP, some kind of precognition or whatever, and that everything that makes you behave in a certain way without knowing why you're behaving that way, in terms of avoiding problems or taking advantage of opportunities, that is all psychic. My belief is it's a combination of both. I think there is a physical basis to certain intuition reactions and responses, but I think it's informed by ESP, because there are some things that are really hard to explain in any physical way, and yet comes through in an intuitive way, and people take action based on that.
So, and we're going to hit a break right here, and we'll come back and pick up with this question, with this setup, which is, so if I'm understanding you correctly, the way that consciousness is applied throughout the universe, then that would apply to every human on planet Earth. Therefore, remote viewing and the ability to do so is inside all of us if we choose to apply it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about that.
Is that an affirmative, though? Are you nodding yes?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Let's take our break right here. Our guest, the one and only Paul Smith, remote viewing / remote viewing and UFOs. And we will get to the UFO side of things when we come back. Stay with us. This is Fade to Black. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Hi, this is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I want to invite you to come to Alaska with me on the Contact at Sea cruise. It is this September 6th through the 13th, 2024. We are on the largest ship in the Pacific Ocean. That's right, the Ovation of the Seas. It's an amazing cruise, and a ship this big is so much fun. We've got lots of activities and lots of great speakers. We are leaving from Seattle to Sitka, Alaska, Skagway, Juneau. We're going to end the cruise in Victoria, BC, and arrive in Seattle on September 13th. We've got a lot of amazing speakers, including we've got Seth Shostak, Scott Walter, Stephen Bassett, Daniel Sheehan, Daryl Sims, Mas Adi, Vivian Chavez, Grant Cameron, Geraldine Orozco, Misha Johnston, and Melanie Aguirre, and a whole lot more. All you have to do is go to divinetravels.com. You can also go to contactatsea.com. Both are going to take you to a full event schedule. You can check in, look at the boat, get things ready to go, and maybe get a cabin with a balcony. That's what I'm talking about. Come see the whales. Come check it all out. Let's go to Alaska this September 6th through the 13th, 2024 with me, Jimmy Church. Now, when you head to divinetravels.com or contactatsea.com and get signed up, you know what? Use my name, Jimmy Church. I'll see you there September 6th through the 13th, 2024. Let's go to Alaska. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest and the #1 podcaster in the world, Sean Kelly. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. Okay, welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, our guest is Paul Smith, and talking about remote viewing / remote viewing and UFOs and consciousness, and we're going to get to all of that in just a second. Paul, right before the break, we were talking about everybody technically should have the gift if they want to apply it and learn it. It's something that any and everybody can do. With that kind of assumption, I was just looking at the chat before the break. I'm going to ask you this, and if you give me the thumbs up on the idea, then we'll run with it, because I need your answer on the worldwide gift, all right, on everybody on the planet. With everybody in the chat room, if I have an object in front of me here, and it's presented, and I say that I do, and I don't say anything more than that, and the audience then focus on my studio and possibly, this object that is in front of me, and maybe formulate what this object is? Or is that ESP and not remote viewing?
Well, remote viewing is a form of ESP. That
Right.
would really technically be remote viewing, unless they got the information out of your head, right? Which would be telepathy, right? It's interesting. Skip Atwater and I had a discussion a long time ago where Skip argued there's no such thing as telepathy, that it all boils down to non-local knowing, even remote viewing. So I think there's a spectrum of different abilities, and they all are related to each other. And so
Yeah, they overlap, don't they?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that would be a very basic, elementary kind of remote viewing experiment. And in fact, it's really not a bad idea to have the audience try that.
Okay,
if they're
so-
set up for it. Now, wait, there's a couple things. It really needs to be a unique thing, because there's this thing called stacking effect in parapsychology research, which is if you get enough people giving enough answers to something that could be a common object, someone is just going to get it accidentally. Right. In fact, not just someone, but a fairly large number of people. If there's a lot, they're going to get it accidentally, and it won't be ESP at all in theory, or at least according to someone who's arguing the scientific merits of a project like that. So it's a really unusual object, and you wouldn't want them to necessarily say what it is. Like if you have a donut.
Okay, I'm going to. Okay, Paul.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have you participate in this. We're going to have the audience do it.
Okay, so let me say this about that.
But hold on.
Okay, all right.
Over to your right on your screen, it says private chat. I'm going to send you in the chat what the object is.
Oh, me? Okay.
Yeah, so and you tell me if this is this is a good target. Okay.
Okay, that's good. That's a good idea.
Okay, check your messages.
Well, I mean, you could do that.
Now that's pretty unique.
Yeah.
I mean, how unique?
So,
How uniquer can I go?
well, there are actually some really unique things you could do, but let's not go there. That's probably it depends, because I have one notion of it in my head, since I haven't seen it either, and it could be way different than what I'm thinking. So that's good. That's good. But what I'm going to say here is, if somebody does actually name it, that is, give us the noun that identifies what kind of a thing it is, that's great. But generally speaking, by trying to figure out what it is, you're going to get your left brain cranking, and it's going to give you all kinds of noise. So the best way to do it is to try and perceive what it looks like, what it feels like, and maybe even sketch a little bit of what you think it looks like, right? And none of the motions in my making have anything to do with the object, right? So it's better to describe. Remote viewing is a descriptive methodology more than anything. And they discovered at SRI that if you try and actually give a noun for something, that you mess up. Sometimes it can be done, but it's a lot easier and more accurate usually to sketch it and describe it verbally using adjectives and so on. So, with that, it probably doesn't help your experiment much.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not going to say anything else other than I have an object in front of me. I have placed it here. And I agree with Paul. I'm not necessarily going to think about it, because then telepathy comes into play, possibly entanglement and other things, right? So let's not go there, but there is an object in front of me. I am watching the chat, and I'll let, if somebody gets closer, nails it on the head, that'd be really cool, because it is indeed unique. Don't listen to Paul. If you say what this is, then I'm going to be very impressed.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that it's easy to guess, and from that perspective, it is unique. So,
okay, so it is. I am of the opinion that our next stage of evolution is going to be dealing with consciousness. It's not going to be physical. It's not going to be a faster computer chip or whatever. It's going to be consciousness. And when ET gets here, and they will, and we'll have a conversation with them, I think that's what you want. You want the answer? The answer is here. It's not of the physical. And once you understand that, then you can take your step up the evolution tree and join the rest of the universe. And by saying something like that, which I think is pretty bold, what do you think? Is that a connection that would be universal, swinging back to ET?
That is a very loaded question, because consciousness, we assume, is pretty much the same for everybody. We don't know that that's true necessarily. There could be a lot of flavors of consciousness in the universe. And when I say flavors of consciousness, I don't even know what that means, right? Except that consciousness could manifest itself differently in different species or whatever. But I think we already are interacting in a consciousness perspective with ETs. Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis, both of whom I know, and Eric I've spent a lot of time around, wrote a paper. And they discussed in one part of that paper, I'm blanking on the name of the paper right now, but they discussed in one part of that paper about consciousness effects associated with UFO, UAP encounters and possible alien encounters. And it really does seem like aliens are able to manipulate our conscious perceptions. Okay. Even to the point where I've come to wonder, now I know there are a lot of experiences out there, and I'm not trying to diminish their experience. And I think there is some reason to believe that at least some people have been physically abducted, if you will. But it's also possible, given what the aliens apparently are able to do with humans, it's also possible that they can give you an experience of being abducted that even if you weren't physically abducted, you are absolutely sure it happened. And frankly, I think that's just as bad or maybe worse than being abducted by an alien, by being made to believe, because that's an invasion of your mind, right? But we can't tell. We don't know the difference. I just want to throw that out as a possibility. But they certainly have made people experience and believe and perceive things that they find out later they didn't really experience and believe and believe and perceive. But it was so real. It seemed so real to them. And that's a scary thought, that if aliens can, in a way, project their consciousness and affect how we perceive and experience things, that could be very dangerous to anybody. Now, I'm going to go back to Ingo Swann here, because Ingo had quite an interest in alien consciousness himself. He wrote a book called Penetration, which kind of explored this idea of alien telepathy, alien consciousness, alien conscious thought projection, alien remote viewing in a way. His belief was that aliens are actually afraid of us. Okay. They're afraid because they feel that we have so much raw consciousness and applied consciousness potential that they are doing everything they can to suppress that, both in a conscious, enforced consciousness way, but also by influencing the powers that be to try and undermine our beliefs in ESP and so on. He would blame a lot of the skeptical resistance to parapsychology research and that kind of thing. He blamed that on aliens trying to thwart it through the people who have, power in our society, the academics and scientists and so on. So it seems like a plausible argument. It's one you can't prove. Obviously, we don't have hardcore evidence to support it yet. Maybe someday we will. And I'm not going to go out and say, this is absolutely true. I'm not going to create a cult, that goes out and we're going to fight the alien consciousness attack or anything like that. But it's at least something we ought to think about. We ought to consider that possibility, because in a universe where literally there are tons of things we don't understand and don't know about, we have to at least allow the possibility that most things are possible. Some things aren't possible, but most things are possible. Whether they're real or not, that remains to be seen. And one of those possibilities is that aliens are literally manipulating our consciousness in ways that are not necessarily for our benefit.
Well, don't you find it interesting that you can have a group of people all asking for something, right? And then ding, right, something lights up in the sky. That's about as compelling, and I've had it happen so many times that it's way beyond coincidence, and things that you don't see normally when you look at the sky. You walk out of a store at night and you look up and nothing is appearing there, but you get a group of people and then suddenly right? It's like, what? And that would indicate to me that ET is winking at us, right? That there is a consciousness connection, that
they're picking up on human focused, concentrated consciousness and then are responding to it. And again, you can't rule that out. I'm agnostic on that idea because I think there's also a possibility where humans can create, I won't say hallucinations because they seem to be more substantive than that, but humans, if they focus their consciousness enough, I think this may have the ability to create the appearance of things that may not actually be what we would classically call aliens or UFOs or whatever. And again, I'm not going to stake out any kind of position on any of this stuff because we just don't know enough. But I think you get to know enough by first staking out the possibilities and considering what different possibilities there are. So one is those kind of mass events that you're talking about could be aliens responding to human consciousness, or they could be human consciousness itself creating what the humans want to see. Right. And I don't know which they are until we, in that encounter, capture one of those UFOs, which proves that it's the UFOs responding. That right. would be evidence, right? That would be evidence. And I'm not ruling that out either. I'm not a skeptic of this. I am just an agnostic in many of the claims that people make about these things.
Well, here, I don't have the answers, but when things like that happen, I know that what we are told is a lie, right? That we're not given the complete picture here. Very, very brief. Steve Murillo, he's great. And Steve Murillo, we were having a party in the desert, had a bungalow cabin thing. And we're out on the balcony eating pizza, and I had about 20 people there. And somebody, it was in Joshua Tree. This was the old Contact, right?
Oh, okay.
This is like 2013, 2014, so 10 years ago. Anyway, somebody says, we're all out on the patio, hey, man, wouldn't it be cool if we saw a UFO right now? and Paul, as I live and breathe, and we are in the desert. Contact in the desert is 19 miles away. We are in the middle of the desert, right? Mm-hmm. And at that moment, out in the desert, about maybe a quarter mile away or less, it was close, this white ball of light goes from the desert floor into the stars.
I'm going to come hang out with you more, Jimmy, because I'd love to have an experience like that.
Dude, it was on cue. Mm-hmm. And all of us, we were like, no, we're looking, and it's gone. It don't 1 second, and it was big. The next day when I woke up, and this was my confirmation of the whole thing, because it was strange and it was really cool, and we loved it, and we laughed and all of that and danced. The next day I wake up, because it was the desert and it was dark. I wake up, I got my coffee, and I went, man, I wonder if that was fireworks. There has to be a house out there or something, right? So I walk out, and you know what's out there? Sand.
Man, so there was nothing.
Nothing. I walked out, I walked out like a quarter mile and looked. It's desert. Joshua trees, desert. There's no houses. There's no road. There's nothing. And I went out to the spot where that thing was desert. It was pretty nuts, man. It was pretty cool. And so that's that consciousness thing that I think applies.
Maybe that brings up a third thought about this that involves consciousness, but on the same way. And that is that there's precognition going on, that it was a UFO or a UAP, whatever you want to call it. It was that, but it wasn't conjured up by the conscious thought. It was whoever said that, getting a precognitive input that it was going to happen. And then saying, oh, that'd be cool if there's UFO, and there was one, right? So that's a different form of consciousness operating, or a different way that consciousness operates. And so there's three possibilities there, and I don't know which one it is.
Or is it all of the above? And goes back to your point, mm-hmm. And the point is that it's all overlapping and connecting. Mm-hmm. We just don't understand what that is. And when we do, don't you feel like all the dominoes are just going to just topple?
Yes.
Right?
And let me tell you something. This might sound counterintuitive to you, but it's true. I hope that doesn't happen in my lifetime. And the reason is
what?
Because all the fun will go out of things.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Mm-hmm. You're right. I say this all the time, and it kind of upsets people, but here, and you've known me for a long time, and here's the situation. One would think, Paul, that after doing 3,000 shows, that's a lot of interviews.
Oh yeah.
Of the very best.
Better you than me.
Right. All right. All the countries that I've been to, and all of the research that I've done, that I would have the answers, and I don't. I don't. And now, do I want the answers? The journey is pretty friggin' fun too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I suspect you might have a few answers, but you probably have more questions than you did when you started.
Is it that I love that. I was just I went out to dinner the other night with Giorgio Tsoukalos, and it turned out to be one of those 4 or 5 hour dinners. All right. And the restaurant stayed open for us till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And they were very gracious and great steakhouse. And this was a big chunk of our conversation, that you go down a path and you get there, you get to and then there's 50 paths to go on. Choose one. And then go down that, 50 questions, 50 more questions. And then, and each one of and it just continues just like forever. And that's the best part of all of this, is just going down and discovery after discovery after discovery, not necessarily answers, but you find out a lot of really cool things. But I don't know if I ever want to get to the end of the line.
Yeah. People talk about in the hereafter that we'll have answers to all the things that we don't understand now. And it could be true, but if so, I think we will have discovered hell rather than heaven, frankly, because John Fowles, the famous English novelist, wrote some really amazing books. One of my favorite books in the world was the Magus that he wrote. And in the Magus, he said, there's power. I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the exact quote, but there's power in mystery, and mystery itself essentially emboldens us and makes us want more, want to explore and all that. Definitely a paraphrase, but that was a sense of it. And it's absolutely right. I think that may be one reason why people get so excited about the UFO world, is because this is a mystery, right? We don't know exactly what it is. We've got lots of speculations, and we know one thing we know for sure is that most of our speculations are probably wrong, right? They're probably wrong, but some of them might be right. And ultimately, whatever the solution to the mystery is, will be very, it'll bring us closure. It'll be very revealing, and it will be very disappointing because we won't have a mystery anymore to pursue.
All of those out there. Oh, let me just say this to the chat room. You guys have been amazing with your remote viewing attempts, but so far, not even close. And so I will ask you, do you want to keep going, or do you want me to do a reveal? Okay. And I'll show you what the object is. And you know what this is where, and you're right, Paul, and I want your response to this so the audience can learn from this. Most of the guesses were things that were personal to me, a guitar pick or a vape pen or an ashtray or a UFO object, and I get that because they are making that association with me. I'm sitting in front of all of these guitars, so you're going to guess certain things, and they know me personally. That clouds the remote viewing, doesn't it? Because
exactly.
you know the target.
That's one of the reasons why you want to be blind, to as much as you can when you're doing remote viewing, is because all this stuff gets in and messes with your brain. So. Okay.
I think the general consensus is to do the reveal. Oh, somebody says,
wait. I'm going to counteract that. I'm going to countermand that order. I think that now they know that it isn't something personal to you.
Oh, good
point.
Know
they're going to exclude guitar picks and all of that stuff. That you actually did select something that is challenging because it isn't associated with you. Why don't you give them one more try and see what they get?
Oh shit!
Oh, did I just not here? Not on
yeah, not on the air, Jimmy. Settle down. I thought somebody had it, but no. For a second there, I just went, whoa. But no. Okay, so, it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
No. And, okay, I don't want to give away a hint. I'm not going to do that. But I'll
because then you're guessing and you're not being psychic. Yeah, you don't want to.
Right. Yeah. But I'll say this. Everybody in the chat has one in their home. There isn't anybody in the chat that doesn't have it. Am I correct in saying that, Paul?
I can neither confirm nor deny. That's probably too much of a hint right there, but we'll see what happens.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll let it run for a few more minutes. now, but back to this. If we get into the disclosure aspect of this, of real contact and real conversations that are going down, then will this expose not only deep philosophical and existential issues onto this, with those that have waxed philosophical into the science, and had a belief system going with large swaths of, the population, and they're going to be wrong. Is that like an existential crisis that the world may face when it's just like, it's not even close to what we thought it was, and we've built up a belief system in one way, and then it's not that at all?
So it's not an existential crisis, but it is a paradigm shift, right? Going back to Thomas Kuhn and also to some degree Emery Lakatos, who did not use the word paradigm shift, but it discussed very similar things. So that's when things turn out to be way different than you thought they were, and we get these all the time in our lives. And it's one of the reasons why people are resistant to new ideas, is because you have a certain concept, like a certain worldview, Weltanschauung, the way the Germans call it, a worldview, and everything fits into it, and it's very nice and neat and tidy. And then something comes along that shows you your worldview is totally wrong. Now, I have a term for this. If I think of it, I'll bring it back up. But anyway, it's this idea you have cognitive dissonance. You can't accept it because it's so different what you believed, and you can't deny that what you've just experienced or seen or whatever is that. And ontological shock, that was the term. Ontological shock essentially means you're shocked to find that reality isn't what you thought it was. Right. So it's not existential. Existential means you're in danger of expiring, right? But it is an ontological shock, and I didn't come up with that word. It was the earliest I can find was the Harvard scientist that was researching abductions and got hit by a car or something. Oh shoot, I blank on his name. Well, you'll know who it is if I remember the name. Anyway, maybe somebody will put it in the chat. So anyway. That is what is going to happen. It's like someone who has a firm belief in one particular religion all their lives, and then they find out that there is something that proves that their religious beliefs were false. And it's the same kind of shock they get. Some people refuse to accept it, even though the evidence is very much right there. And you get that with a lot of skeptics. You show them a lot of absolutely compelling evidence, and they default to, it can't be true. You're just making that up.
Okay, you ready? You ready? Okay. Somebody got it right.
Okay.
You ready? Oh, wait, that's the wrong one. I clicked on the wrong one. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's correct. Now, it could have been a little more specific, but it is. Okay, that's close enough.
Go ahead and show them.
It's a black USB charging block.
Very simple pattern, very simple shape.
Yep. But that's
yeah.
You got it right.
Okay. Congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty cool. That's pretty good. Her name is Magic too, as well.
Yeah.
Magic. Shoot me an email with your address and shirt size, and I'll send you a Faded Black t-shirt.
I thought you were going to give her a guitar. Man, you're a cheapskate. Speaking of guitars, you seem to have not a majority, but definitely a plurality of Les Pauls. So
I do.
Are they your favoriteest guitars, or are you just like?
No, I'm a Strat guy. No, see, this is what's weird with that. That's a really good question. That's an excellent question. I've always been a Strat guy. I've got a lot of Strat shaped guitars, and so forth. And for the majority of my life, and then about maybe 10 years ago, I got a Les Paul, which doesn't have it's a different shape. It's heavy, short scale, all of that stuff. And I just fell back in love. And I didn't think that it would have that kind of effect on me. Now I have a lot of hardtails and I have a lot of Les Pauls. There's probably,
I see 4 right there. Maybe, 4.
Yeah. There's four, well, that you can see.
Yeah.
There's 2 more over there. There's one over there, and I've got like 3 in my living room. Then I have some in storage.
Well,
but
how long you're going to have more than you can play?
I can't move these cameras around. They're static. You can kind of, you can see some more guitars there. If I come up here, you see this wall over here. This is covered as well. And then the wall behind me looks just like the wall that's here. So that's covered too as well. And this goes, so over in this direction, you only see this Les Paul and that, but there's another 10 feet of guitars.
So is there a mirror there or something? No, there's a Les Paul there. There's one down there. There's one there, and there's one over there. Unless I'm seeing a reflection.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and now out of all of these, probably my favorite one isn't what you would think. My favorite one, well, they're all cool, but this one right here, is a very unique. It's a gold top. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
That's all black back gold top.
That's a pretty one. That's gorgeous guitar.
But what's cool about this is it's got a maple fretboard.
Ooh.
Most Les Pauls have rosewood or ebony. In fact, they all do. This is about 15 years old, and this has a roasted maple. Look at that.
My
a roasted
goodness.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. It's even more handsome than you are.
It actually is. It's a lot more handsome.
Is there a tap on the bottom pickup there, or can you play it as a single coil?
No, none of my all of mine are standard wiring.
Okay, so I should probably move out of this. This is get down too much in the weeds for people who aren't into electric guitars. So.
You know what's amazing? No, this is where I'll debate you on this. I think that those whose minds have been opened are creative, and they all have a music side to them, and they understand. And whether it's guitar, writing, singing, keyboard, whatever it is, right? But so many of my guests, we don't necessarily talk about it on the show, but when we do the sound check and they go, okay, yeah, I've got that guitar. I've got that one. Can I see that one over there, Jimmy? Right. It's like every guest, man. I'm very, very impressed with, like you saying coil tap, that's, man, I love that. I already loved you, but that's pretty impressive, man. That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive.
I'm glad you feel that way.
Back to consciousness.
Yeah.
I want to stay right here.
Yeah.
Because of your understanding of remote viewing and swinging this over to the ET part of this, and I lean on entanglement, but we have all of this communication that seems to be happening. Some of it's in the physical, right, with ET, but a lot of it is telepathy, channeling, whatever you want to call it. It could be entanglement, and but that is something that is occurring. Do you think that is the case? Number one, and number two, is there a possibility of we need to be careful of who a bug just flew in my mouth?
That's a bad sign.
I saw it. It went blap. That was crazy. That was crazy. That was like the Exorcist. That was like the Omen. That we need to be cautious of who we are opening up our minds to and receiving information from. You know, the trickster situation.
Yeah, and I think that's really true. You know, you have people, I won't name names, who think they ought to be standing on top of a skyscraper with a welcome sign for the next UFO that flies by. And if you ever watch Independence Day, you know that had a bad ending. but the thing is, there may be aliens that are really friendly, but we don't know that because their consciousness could be so much different than ours. In fact, I go through 6 scenarios that I won't, I think we're running a little low on time, so I won't run through them here, but everywhere from really friendly aliens like ET, the extraterrestrial, to really bad aliens like on Independence Day, to aliens that don't even know we're here. I call that the stepping on ants scenario, where aliens aren't even aware of us as conscious beings, and so they just come in and walk all over us, you know, without knowing they're hurting anything. And who knows which or if all of those different scenarios might be true of different aliens. We don't know. And so I'm not one to say we should attack every alien or spaceship that comes our way. That's bad policy too. But I think we should at least be cautious. I don't think we ought to be broadcasting our existence out there. There's a series of books written by Chinese, I can't pronounce his name, essentially the Dark Forest trilogy. You know, it starts with the 3-body problem, and Dark Force is one of those where in that universe, and it's very plausible, survival requires that if you are in a intelligent species in the universe, if you come across another intelligent species, even though you're not angry at them, that you don't hate them or anything, you wipe them out, because you don't know if they'll come to a technological level where they'll wipe you out instead if they get the chance first. Now, I hope that's not the way the universe is, but this book makes a really good case for it, I have to say. And so it's always good to be careful about advertising your presence until you actually know what you're dealing with.
In the example in 3-body problem, and you touched upon it right now, and it was to me such an amazing but almost extremely plausible take on the situation, which is they called us bugs. That was the first thing. Remember, they said, you are bugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the second part of it is when the big reveal happened, they said it's going to take us 400 years to get to you. We are more advanced than you now, but in those 400 years, you're going to be more advanced than us by the time we get there, because we're going to be static. We're on spaceships, right? But you are going to grow your science on Earth. And so we need to stop your growth right now so we can control you when we get there. And that was a really good spin, and one that I think we should take, slow down a little bit and ponder. It's kind of like what Stephen Hawking said, right? Don't shout to the world or to the universe. Don't do it. You don't know who you're shouting to.
That's right. People have this, it's a logical fallacy, actually. And you'll hear this argument a lot, even from some pretty prominent folks in the UFO community. They'll say, well, aliens clearly are more advanced technologically than us, and that must mean they're more morally advanced as well. It doesn't mean that at all. Their two are not connected. There's not a necessary connection between moral advancement and technology advancement. In fact, if you look at human history, just as an example, the conquistadors were much more technically advanced than the Mayans were, and look what they did to the Mayans. Right? The Nazis were arguably one of the most scientifically advanced people in the world at the time, and look what they did. And even today, you get the Chinese. I don't want to get in trouble with the Chinese, but they've got the Uyghur problem, where they're oppressing this Muslim subculture in China and treating them pretty badly. And yet the Chinese are also very advanced culture technologically. Technology does not equal moral advancement at all. There's no reason to assume that. And we might be encountering a technologically advanced species that has absolutely no moral compunctions, is doing something nasty to us. If we have something they want, that they have to do something to us to get, right? And I'm not saying they're all like that. I'm not saying any of them are like that. But we got to be careful, because we can't rule out that possibility. And it could be fatal if we get too eager to embrace an alien culture that we don't understand.
Well, but the argument to that, which again, I think the argument holds water. The defense's case holds water in that in order to evolve and to move on and to survive wiping yourself out, of surviving biological disasters, surviving another alien invasion, or surviving an asteroid or cosmic impact or disease or nuclear weapon, whatever it is, to move past that and survive, then you would have also evolved through killing and everything else. And
yeah, so
I understand that, but that would make a lot of sense. But the other part, this is it. This is where I back off on that. The universe is positive and negative stuff.
Yeah.
You're not going to have good without experiencing the bad. And how do you know what bad is if you don't experience the good? And it's a philosophical question, that's thought experiment that's been out there forever. But if everything is good all the time, how do you know what bad is?
Exactly. I mean, it's like saying everybody's above average. You know, what is that?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Right.
In fact, so I'm a member of the LDS Church, the Mormon Church, and we call that the principle of opposition in all things. In fact, there's a passage in the Book of Mormon about that, where you have to have an opposition to things, and it says exactly what you just said, right? I, by the way, brought that up for a moment. I have to say, I like to say this to all audiences when we start talking about aliens. I belong to, as far as I know, the only Christian denomination, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the full long name, but the Mormon Church, as far as I know, it's the only Christian denomination that believes, as a matter of doctrine, that there is intelligent life on many other planets in the universe. So,
can I ask you about that for a second? Didn't John Smith? What? Okay,
Joseph.
Is it Joseph Smith?
Yeah.
Oh, you're related.
No.
Okay. So anyway, I forgot the joke that you and I wrote earlier.
Oh, right. You said the man, the myth, and I said no, the Smith.
Yeah, the man, the Smith, the legend. That your origin story is from ET?
No, there's been interpretations like that, really outside the church. There's a Fate magazine article that actually made me think a little bit differently about this. It said Joseph Smith was, Joseph Smith claimed to have been visited by Jesus and God at some point when he was a young man. And the Fate magazine article said, well, Joseph Smith was visited by extraterrestrials that he perceived as God and Jesus. I started thinking, I said, well, no matter how you parse it, that's true. God and Jesus would be extraterrestrials, maybe not in the sense we think of it, but they don't live here. They're on another, on another existence somewhere, another planet or whatever, right? And so technically they're extraterrestrials. And in fact, technically, even at least according to Mormons, all of us are extraterrestrials in a certain sense, because we didn't originate on this planet. Our essences, what we call spirits, intelligences, didn't originate here. We came here as part of our progression plan, I guess you could call it. But I don't want to get too much into religious doctrine.
Well, I don't do religion on the show, but I do the conspiracy of religion, Paul.
Is that right?
Speaking of that, I would say that the Mormon religion is one of the biggest mysteries of all, that most of it clearly don't understand. And it's right here, United States, and we just don't know. It's really weird. You ask the average American about the Mormon religion, and they're going to be way off base. And
that's not for lack of Mormons trying to tell them, right? I mean, I did a church mission in Switzerland, and half the time they didn't want to hear about it, right? And of course, we have missionaries everywhere. We have advertising, I guess they call it. We're trying our hardest to unveil the mystery of Mormonism. But, people are reluctant to get involved in a discussion about this stuff. I understand why. I understand why.
Okay, I'm going to tell you one of the funniest stories I have. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
Salt Lake City. I'm going to go 1996.
Okay.
I'm speaking there. Okay. I've got a friend in the car. I am driving rental car. We flew in. Got a rental car. We're in downtown Salt Lake City, and I don't know anything about what's going on.
Okay.
And this is what I do. I'm in downtown Salt Lake City. Pull up to a stoplight, and I'm talking to my friend. Where do you want to go for dinner and drinks? Right? Okay.
Oh.
All right. So
okay. I'm excited.
We don't know. We don't have any idea. And up next to us pulls a cop. Pulls up a cop. He's right next to us. And I love police. Love talking to them. I will go up to any of them and yo, what's up? And something that doesn't happen to them like ever, right? But I'll do that. I don't care. And I don't have a fear of it, I should say. Anyway, I roll down my window. I think he's by himself. He's driving. And he's looking dead ahead. And I'm like catching his attention. And he looks at me and he rolls down the window. And I said, hey, how you doing? I'm pretty good. Where can a couple of friends go for a drink? And this is what he's looking at me and rolls up the window. Just rolls it up, man, and drives away. And my friend goes, what'd he say? I go, nothing. I was like, what's going on? And I went to the place where I was speaking, and I told them, I was like, oh, man, can't buy alcohol. What'd you ask the cop?
So you can buy alcohol in Utah, but you have to get it at a state liquor store. I don't know what it is today, but
it was hilarious, man.
Yeah.
It was.
Well, and I suspect the cop thought you were screwing with him. He thought you were giving him a hard time, probably, and
he was looking right at me. He's like this, looking right at my eyeballs. It was hilarious, man.
That's good. Hilarious. It was a good story to remember Salt Lake by. Yeah.
Now, can you? I've asked other remote viewers this. What about remote viewing ET or off-planet remote viewing?
Well, that's been done a lot. Whether it's successful or not, we don't know because we haven't got information to verify, that what we remote viewed was true. But Skip Outwater, in fact, Skip Outwater has just come out with a book. I wish I had a copy of it. It's called Project 8200, 8200, right? Project 8200. And that book compiles an early remote viewer named Pat Price remote viewed just on his own for alien bases around the Earth. And he came up with 4 locations in mountains. So Mount Hayes in Alaska, Mount Zeal in Australia, and right now I'm blanking on the other 2. And anyway, and he created a remote viewing transcript of, I don't know, I would say 38 pages or so, maybe 40. And he gave those to Hal Puthoff, who was the director of the program at the time, along with Russell Targ. And later, about 10 years later, Hal gave Skip Outwater there at Fort Meade. He gave him copies of Price's material. And Skip decided he was going to run some of his viewers on those targets themselves, blind, target on Mount Hayes, on Mount Zeal, whatever. And there were, Joe McMoneagle did 4 of them. Another guy named Fern Govin did 1. And I did 1. And Bill Ray did 1. Charlene Schufelt did 1. And I think I'm leaving somebody out. Mel Riley, maybe. Yes, it was Mel Riley. So anyway, we all did this. And Skip has been sitting on that stuff since 1984, right? And he's finally got it all together and compiled in a book that he just published like last week or maybe the week before called Project 8200. You can get it off Amazon. And he doesn't do a lot of commentary in it. He just allows the data to speak for itself. And so you can go through there and see Pat Price's stuff and then compare it to all of our sessions. And it's interesting to see how we produced a lot of similar data to what Pat Price did, and yet we were totally oblivious. So we didn't have any idea that Skip even had this stuff, right? And yet he runs us on it, and we end up producing data that is, in some respect, quite similar to what Pat Price produced. And then other information that may or may not be true that's also possibly connected with it. So,
and anything that you could walk away from feeling pretty concrete, and because Pat, obviously, I never got a chance to interview, but rock star status, I would say, or at least maybe in an ego sense, but also respected, so much so that the CIA stepped in, and there are those rumors out there that, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, because he's no longer with us, but that he might have talked too much, and also might have been too good.
That's baloney. That's absolute baloney. People think the CIA killed him because he was too good, but they hired him. He was working for them at the time he died, right? Mm-hmm. And he was very good. There's no question about that. But the CIA was using him to get the data. They're not going to get rid of the goose that lays the golden egg. Now, Pat, 2 weeks before he died, told his daughter, and she's told me this directly, I've had a conversation with her about this, told his daughter that if anything happened to him, it was the KGB. He said he was convinced the KGB was out to get him. And that makes way more sense than the CIA, because, if he's providing their secrets to the CIA, they're not going to want to have him around. And really, we know that the only antidote to remote viewers is to take him out. There's no other kind of defense against remote viewing. So
was he that good?
I never met him. I was never involved in remote viewing, but the results that have been left behind are sometimes amazingly good. It's really astonishing. He did some things that, so far, as I can tell, nobody's duplicated. He was just, and it's hard to say how that came to be. I don't know.
Where can now? I want to learn. I've never I've told you this so many times in the past, including just recently, that I need to get focused and learn to do this. My producer Michelle, as she's really good, and she loves the environment and loves the people, and I need to just get focused and see what I can do with this for the audience and everybody else out there that wants to check this out. Where can they go?
So I think probably the very first place to start is with my book, The Essential Guide to Remote Viewing, because most people start off with not being clear exactly what remote viewing is, or if they are, there's lots of big gaps in their knowledge. And my book is for people like that. It's called Essential Guide to Remote Essential Guide to Remote Viewing. It's available on Amazon, and it covers the gamut. It's kind of like a survey course in college. It talks about possible mechanisms of how it might work. It talks about a little bit about the history, not a lot, and it gives you a couple of guided exercises on how to do it at a basic level. And there's a ton of other stuff in there. That's a good place to start. And you can also go and get a lot of information on my website, which is rviewer.com. That's the letter R in the word viewer, rviewer.com. And you just make a deep dive in there. It talks about my courses and all of that, but it also has a lot of just additional information that isn't going to cost you anything, and will help educate you in terms of how this works.
One last question, and we're about, let me see here. I think we're a few seconds away of being cut off.
Yeah.
Do you have a student, maybe once a year or every 6 months, that stands out and you just go, whoa?
You can't parse it by time, but sometimes I'll have a couple of them in a row, and then sometimes not for a while. But I've had students that actually impress even me, and I always hold out the possibility that any student has that capability if they apply themselves. Right. But I've had some that I didn't see that coming, and they just do some wonderful stuff. So, I would be happy if every one of my students does better than me. I mean, that's the goal of somebody who teaches. So, hopefully one day that'll be the case.
Paul, you're the absolute very best, my friend. So good to see you. And I can't wait to hang out with you again. And the last time we did, it was just an amazing, man. We talked for 2-3 hours standing on our feet. It was pretty incredible. And just thank you so much. You're the very best. It is rviewer.com. And certainly you can head over to Amazon, but the website itself is a great resource. So everybody head over there. The links are below. Paul, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much.
You too, Jimmy. Thank you.
Paul Smith, again, rviewer.com. It is right there. Tomorrow night on Fade to Black, Melanie Aguirre is with us. And so I'll see everybody tomorrow night. Until then, go Beckley Teppy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go Beckley Teppy.